Welcome to Nailed It, a podcast featuring business tips from industry leaders, presented by Clever Punch. Here's your host, Jade Flogerzi.
All right, welcome to Nailed It podcast, where we dive into the stories and strategies of those who have truly nailed it in their fields. So today we have a special guest, Brandon Owen, who spent over a decade building and leading teams for software companies at every stage of growth and across various industries. Brandon's renowned for his ability to build world-class cultures and drive organizational change. Peers have described him as a leader who can turn around broken teams and transform them into winners, the go-to person for overcoming the toughest challenges and solving the most complex problems. Currently, as the founder of Customers and Culture, Brandon focuses on increasing customer and employee engagement by mastering the human side of business. He's also a fractional VP of operations at Propel Build, where he leads and scales all business operations. So let's explore Brandon's insights on leadership, culture building, and tackling the human side of business. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jade. Glad to be here.
So tell me about your background and what made you start Customers and Culture.
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, I spent the beginning of my career at several different software companies, building and leading teams. Some of those I came in and the team was kind of established, but they just needed to turn around. Others, I came in with one, maybe two employees and had to go out and hire and build a team up to like 15, 20 people. So have been in every different phase of software companies. But then just about a year ago, I jumped over to Propel Build to help a friend of mine scale his construction business. And through that process, what I realized was that whether you're at a software company or at a construction company, business is easy until people get involved. And that human element of business is often the most difficult to solve. And it's actually where I'm at my best. And so I saw an opportunity to create Customers and Culture and help companies master the human side of business. Every company has customers and every company has a company culture. And I love to make both of those things into a competitive advantage.
Culture, you mentioned culture a lot. It's a buzzworthy kind of word. It's a thing that business owners want for their company, for their team. But how do you define company culture? What makes good culture?
Yeah, culture is definitely buzzworthy these days. Before we got on here, I typed company culture into Amazon and got 60,000 book reviews. So definitely top of mind for a lot of business owners. And I think it's totally fair that it's top of mind because it is so important and it matters so much. Companies with strong culture consistently outperform companies with weak culture on just about every metric. So it's makes sense that people are thinking about it a lot. But the problem that I see most often is that it's kind of misconstrued and people are thinking about culture and what they're thinking about is things like ping pong tables and unlimited vacation and, nap pods at Facebook, things like that. And that's just not what culture is about. They don't have a lot to do with culture. In fact, you can have a lot of ping pong tables and still have a really bad culture. And so the way I like to think about culture is it's the way that we do things here. It's how do we treat each other? How do we work together? How do we respond when things go poorly? What are the norms and behaviors that happen day to day at this company? And I think it's so important to remember that culture is action oriented and your behaviors are what establish your culture, despite what, the values that you may throw on the wall only impact your culture to the extent that you live up to those values. And so I'll stop there. I could go on about culture for a long time, but
I do have one other question about it. What do you think is the biggest influence on culture within a business?
Yeah, I mean, there's some obvious ones, like obviously the people that you hire and the leaders at your organization. If your leaders aren't, creating a great culture, then it's almost impossible to have a great culture. But something that I think look at, like if I want to see how a company's culture is, what I'm going to look for is like, how does this company respond when everything falls apart? Like when a project goes sideways, when a developer pulls a contract out from under you, how does this company respond? And that's going to tell me a ton about their culture. Do they respond by rallying together and seeing how they can go solve problems and keep moving forward? Do they respond by blaming one another and complaining and getting defensive. So much of culture is seen in how people respond when things go poorly.
I can relate to a lot of that. How do you get involved and help improve company culture?
Yeah, so there's several ways, but I think the biggest way is getting in a room with leaders and asking them, like, first, how do you think your culture is doing? And there's a lot of leaders that think their culture is great, but then you go out and talk to their employees, and maybe it's not as great as they thought. And so culture is holistic in that you've got to have people bought in from the top all the way to the bottom. And so it's getting in a room with leaders, hearing how they think their culture is, and then testing that against the rest of the company to see where the culture really sits. And then once we know like what reality is, then we can start to think about how do we make changes. What I think about as the pillars of a great culture are curiosity, failure, ownership, candor, connection, and safety. So curiosity, do our people have the opportunity here to like flesh out new ideas and bring new ideas to the table? Failure, how do we respond when we fail? Is that treated at our company? Ownership, do people take ownership of hard problems? Candor, do we have open and honest feedback, both up the chain of command to leadership and down from leadership to employees? Connection, are people connected to one another and to the work at large? And then lastly, all that together creates safety, which is the hallmark of a great culture.
I know you work as a consultant. I know you enjoy working with construction companies. What is the most common culture weakness that you see, or is there a factor of culture that you think is common in the construction industry that you love to get in and tackle?
Yeah, the thing that most immediately comes to mind is in a construction project, there's no shortage of like people to blame. So, with so many hands in the pot. So that's one weakness that I see often is like, oh, well, the sub didn't do his job. And then the subcontractor's like, oh, well, I didn't do my job because the electrician didn't do his job. And so creating a culture where we don't do the blame, complain, defend thing, but we take ownership and figure out what can I do to move this ball forward. And so that's probably something I've seen the most often, and that can go from the construction company itself, that can be in the subcontractors. We see a lot of times in construction, your subcontractors are only thinking about their specific piece of the job and not all of the other trades that are going to have to come in and do this thing. So as an example, your sheetrock guy has done all the drywall, everything's painted, everything looks great. The electrician comes in, and the place where he was supposed to put his light isn't cut out like it was supposed to be, and so he just blows a hole through the drywall because he's got to put in an outlet or a light switch, without thinking about the fact that now a drywall person is going to have to come back through and do repairs. And so that lack of ownership and just propensity to be defensive and blame other people for problems is something that I've seen a lot in construction companies.
The example you just said, my husband worked for 20 years in audio video, and that exact situation would happen on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Yeah.
So we got connected. Obviously you have customers and culture. That's your business that you consult from. But we got connected through your work with Propel Build. So tell us more about Propel Build. Where is it located? A little bit about the company, and also how you got connected to help them.
Yeah, Propel Build is a general contractor in Dallas, and they specialize in building mostly small multifamily, but building for investors and developers. And, I spent early part of my career working for software companies, but Luke, the CEO of Propel, has been a close friend of mine for a really long time. And so I've kind of gotten to watch as he's built Propel. In fact, I remember running into him one day when he was kind of bouncing around the idea of naming his company Propel in his head. And I remember talking to him about that. So it's crazy to think now that we're getting to work together more closely. But last summer, I happened to be looking for a new opportunity at the same time that he was looking for a leader to come in and help him scale the business. He was growing really fast, hiring a lot of people. And I remember he told me, I know all about how to build the buildings, but I need someone to help me build the business. And I told him, if that's what you need, I can do that. If you need someone to help build buildings, I don't know a lot, but I can help you, scale and build the business. And so I jumped in, and it's been a really fun journey to this point, just getting to learn more about the construction industry, getting to work with Luke, who him and I are really closely aligned in how we think about things. It's been a lot of fun.
It seems like your strengths really complement one another. One thing that stood out to us with Propel Build was a very strong commitment to their mission and their core values. Why did you start there when it came to helping them?
Yeah, I think that mission and values are so important. And anytime I'm coming in to lead a team or turn a team around, mission and values is where I start, because when done right, they can drive all the decisions that you make. They can give a framework for how you operate. They can breathe new life into a team that's struggling. I've seen a broken team rally around a new mission and new values and just completely turn around. So it's just amazing the impact that mission and values can have. And we've seen that at Propel the same way. So
When it came to choosing their core values, how did you go about that? What was your process?
yeah, so there's several things that we considered when we were thinking about core values. First, and I've talked about this a lot already, but they had to be action oriented. We didn't want, fluffy pie in the sky values that you couldn't really connect to like day to day action. So that was one big thing. Second one was we wanted to avoid what we called pay to play values, values that are just non negotiable parts of being a good human, things that we would expect anyone that we hired to just already possess. We didn't want to put those as a core value, because if values are meant to drive decision making, then you shouldn't have to look at a core value to know to tell the truth. As an example, if you think about, companies often use integrity as a core value. I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody that has that as a core value, but for us, it was like, if someone has to look at the wall and see integrity on the wall to be reminded to tell the truth, that's not someone that we want on our team. It's just that's a basic requirement of being a good person. So we avoided those kinds of pay to play values. And then the third thing, probably the least important of the three things, was we tried to make it so the first letter of each core value spelled out the word propel. We're kind of tossing around the idea right now of like, is 6 core values too many? But for the time being, we have 6 core values. We landed on people, resilience, ownership, pace, excellence, and leadership.
I love it. That actually the acronym doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little forced, but it did work. It feels organic in your situation.
Yeah,
And
I was glad
you.
it worked. It made it easier to remember all 6 of them. So
I love it. What else have you been working on to help them?
yeah, it's been a busy year. We started with core values and mission. We started using the Working Genius assessment to evaluate our employees and our teams, which has been great. We implemented some new project management tools that have made us more efficient. We brought on Clever Punch to help us rebrand and launch a new website. Spun off a second company that almost doubled our profitability on each of our projects. Started using the profit first accounting methodology. Hired a couple people. Man, it's been crazy what we've packed into just 12 months. But yeah, that's all that comes to mind right now.
You mentioned Working Genius assessment. Is that one of your tools? How does it work? Where did it come from?
Yeah, Working Genius. We love Working Genius at Propel. Luke and I have really latched onto it. It's not mine. I wish I was smart enough to have come up with it, but it's based on a book, or comes from a book by Patrick Lencioni. And the book is The 6 Types of Working Genius. And then there's a personality assessment that goes along with that. And essentially, there's 6 types of working genius that take you from start to finish of any project. So you've got wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. And every person has 2 of those that are their working genius. There's 2 that are their working competency, and 2 that are working frustration. And you need all 6 of those to get any project done. So thinking about the very top of the project of wonder, that wonder is a person who's always asking, like, I wonder why, or I wonder if we could help build more affordable housing. And then invention is the person who says, oh, I have an idea. Why don't we build a 8-unit multifamily project at the corner of Main and First Street. And discernment is the person that looks and says, they kind of dig into that idea and poke some holes and say, I don't think Main and First Street is the best place. Maybe we should do Main and Fourth Street. And then Wonder Invention Discernment. Galvanizing is the person, this is one of my geniuses, is that then goes to the team and gets them all excited and says, hey, we're going to go build a new project over here and we're going to help build more affordable housing and it's going to be amazing. And then enablement is the person who goes and the people that are going to go build that building, they get all those people together. And then tenacity is the person that just loves to like push things across the finish line. And so while that tenacity person is pushing things across the finish line, the person whose genius is wonder has already moved on to the next thing. They're thinking about where's the next place that we could build more affordable housing. And so it's just a great framework for how to align teams and align people around their working genius. And so as an example, I mentioned one of my geniuses is galvanizing, which is not one of Luke's geniuses, our CEO. And so when our team needs to be rallied together around an idea, where previously Luke felt like this responsibility, like, oh, I'm the CEO, I have to do those things. Now he just grabs me and he's like, hey, I need you to galvanize the team around this idea. And I'm like, I'm sweet. That's awesome. I love to do that galvanizing work. And so it's been just really, really impactful for us. We had a member of our office team who was his genius is enablement and tenacity, which is like the profile of a superintendent, which is in the field. But he was one of our office employees and he was having to do a bunch of work that was focused on discernment and invention. And once we realized what his working genius was, we moved him into a superintendent role and like just watched him come to life. It was amazing because now he was working in a place where his genius was and what he was best at. So we love the working genius profile. Luke and I both had our wives take it so we could see what their geniuses were. So it's been great for Propel, and I think it would be great for any company to know where each one of their employees fall on those 6 factors.
And make sure the right people are in the right seats.
Yeah, totally.
You also mentioned, I think you said profit first budget, implementing a profit first budget.
Yeah.
Budgeting is a huge issue in companies. Some people don't have one. Some business owners, it's not accurate. Tell us more about how that works.
Yeah. So, and I'm not going to go super deep in the weeds because I'm not an accountant, but the high level of profit first is that the way people normally think about business is like they've got their top line revenue and then they go through all their expenses, all of their overhead, all of those things until they get to the bottom and they have their profit left. And what often happens and what can happen is that overhead gets a little bit inflated. This thing costs a little more, that thing costs a little bit more. And so all of a sudden you get to your profit at the bottom and it's like, oh, well, there's not that much here, or there's nothing here, or we lost money. And profit first basically flips that on its head and it says, we're going to figure out what our profit margin is going to be. And whenever we have top line revenue come in, we're going to first put things into our profit account. And then we're going to, like, whatever's left over is how we're going to think about our overhead. And so it's a way of just making sure that you run a profitable business. And yeah, it's been really helpful for Luke, especially to think about how we run the financial side of our company.
I love it. I'm thinking about a business owner, someone that is the president at a construction company. They're listening to this. They have these issues that you can help with. Maybe they're thinking about bringing someone in like you to help. Mm-hmm. Do you run into people? I think this can happen in any industry, but I would imagine it's more common in the construction industry where the team is maybe pushing back against things that feel corporate or things that feel like someone's coming in from the outside. You know, they're going to try to change things. They don't really get us. I'm not signing up for that. Like, I'm not doing the acronym on the wall. Do you run into that? Is there pushback, or how has that dynamic worked?
I mean, the short answer is yes, I've run into that. And you can run into that at any company, construction or otherwise. And for me, coming into Propel as a quote unquote outsider, the way that I made sure that I didn't like fall into that trap was I just came in eyes wide open to our team of like, listen, I'm not a construction guy. I don't know how construction projects are built. And so like, I'm going to look to you guys to teach me that side of things. And I'm going to stick to, what I know, which is how to build out processes and how to build culture and how to, lead you guys to the best of my ability, despite the fact that I don't know how to build, a construction project. And coming in with that humility of, hey, I've never built a building before, and asking a lot of questions of our team along that process, I think helped me a lot.
I get this question for Clever Punch a lot. What is it that you like about working with construction companies? Why work with them?
Yeah, there's a lot that I love about construction companies. First is just the tangible aspect of their work. I mean, it sounds obvious, but you can clearly see there wasn't a building there, and now there is a building there. And that's not something that you have as much in a software company. So that tangible side is really great to look out and see this is what these hands and minds have built. But bigger than that for me personally is just I see construction as a critical function for our economy that's been so underserved by technology, leadership development, culture creation, all the things that these software companies are doing in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas can be applied to the construction industry. And I love getting to bring those lessons and things I've learned at tech companies and software companies and bring those into help an industry like the construction industry.
And is there any other industries that you specialize in or that you like working with?
Yeah, I mean, my company's built on the reality that every business has customers and culture. But, alongside construction companies, I like working with any other professional services organizations, law firms, marketing agencies, recruiting firms, architecture firms, any of those small companies where I can bring those lessons I've learned in the tech and software world and put them into play in other industries. That's what I really, really like. So, of course, I could help software companies, but being able to bring something new to industries that haven't had those sorts of lessons and frameworks and things like that is what I like to do the most.
Nice. So for anyone listening that is interested in what you have to offer, feels like they identify with the challenges that you can help with in their business, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So my website's an easy place to start, www.customersandculture.com. And then my email is just brandon@customersandculture.com. Anybody wants to chat, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think any business owner, construction or otherwise, can relate to the challenges that come when you have people involved, employees, customers. And if they're good at running the business and they can bring someone like you to come in and help, it could be a really good complement to their skills and really help things improve internally, which of course is going to help the business externally. So thanks so much for the insights that you shared. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Nailed It, business tips from industry leaders, brought to you by Clever Punch. Nailed It is all about connecting with people, building relationships, and helping each other. If you're interested in connecting with any of the guests on our episodes, you can find their contact info in our show notes or on the podcast page at cleverpunchco.com. You can also email info@cleverpunchco.com with any questions or feedback. I'm your host, Jade Flogerzi. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.